I kind of told David that, hello everyone. We are here. It's Wednesday. We're here with Ricky. You probably all know that Ricky and I got through all 10 planets. Surprisingly, we just persevered like commitment artists and we did it. And so now we can branch out into doing other things. And we have brought Ricky on with someone who I would say knows who Ricky is and is a super fan of Ricky, David Marcus. So David, how's your day going?
My day's going good. Watching a lot of college football playoffs today.
Nice.
Yeah, just excited to be here, you know, looking
How often
forward
do you
to it.
watch football?
Oh, phew. uh, I mean, Saturdays and Sundays in the fall are kind of set aside for that. I come from a sports family, so my parents usually have whatever games on. Uh, yep.
You know, Ricky, the way we got here was that Dave and I were talking, and I was like, "What's your dream in life?" And he's like, "My dream is to be a football player." And so I was like, "I know a football player."
I was I mean, I'm 35. I played in high school. Um, I was an all conference receiver. It was a long time ago. I played both ways. I was a linebacker too,
Oh,
and
wow.
I did the school I went to was not known for football, but our senior year we kind of had a bit of a storybook season and picked to finish last, won the league title. Had a bunch of seniors and it was a pretty cool experience. I took a different route after high school, and didn't end up going to college right away. And but it was always, I remember when I walked off the field after we lost the playoff game that year, um, telling my dad, I was like, that can't be the last football game I ever play. I just can't, and
Yeah.
I had a few guys from that team went on to play, like Division 3, and I took my own route, but as circumstances have kind of allowed for, like I've had some time on my hands in the last handful of years, like really just dedicated myself to really transforming myself physically, not even necessarily with like a goal, an end goal in mind, or like being too wrapped up in what the results would be, but just staying, head down and at least allowing myself to if an opportunity were to come along, like I could do it, like I know I have the talent, like
Wow.
I have a bunch of college credits, and I could, it's kind of one of those things where, like, even if it doesn't happen, like I've um gained a lot from just kind of drawing on that, even, short-lived experience way back when.
I'm imagining Ricky pouncing on you. That's what football players
No.
do.
I mean, maybe that's what happens in the heat of the battle, but the heat of the battle is such a small percentage of the time that football players spend with each other. Um, and especially for me, I have, well, yeah, I have Venus conjunct Mars, and so I have like a love, an appreciation for anything that has to do with competition.
So to
So
translate that to you, David, is like Venus is our love and social planet, and Mars is the aggressive planet. And because Ricky has those married, he like loves to have aggression happen. That's why he doesn't mind when he and I get in fights. But
Well,
yeah.
it's aggression, but I also, the Venus Mars are in a trine aspect to Saturn in the 11th. So the appreciation of that aggression, right, competition applied in a group environment strategically, right? Football. So so for me, it's more of like once I hear the story, right? Because I know I've been there. So once I hear the story of there wasn't much expected of us, seniors came together as a team and we made it work to get a championship. Oh wow. Okay. That, like, to me, we're brothers, right? We're in the same we're in the same fraternity now.
You're saying there's a team element to it too. Yeah, it's like you get along, but then you battle. So tell me, Ricky, have you seen a lot of charts of football players? Like, would you be able to look at David's chart and see if he has what it takes or no?
Um I don't know. I don't to You can see if someone doesn't have what it takes, but you can't see, you can't really see if someone has what it takes, meaning you can see the potential in a chart, but you can't see, the chart can't help you see into someone's soul, right? And to see into their upbringing and what's in their heart. You can see the potentials, you know, and you know that if someone gets their shit together, what they could achieve. But yeah,
So
these
would you say that
potentials.
certain charts are just too wan though to be a football player? Like, I mean, David obviously has a strong enough spirit to be on this show with us scary people, but like some charts are pretty wan. But and then some
Well,
fear.
so I'm gonna go there, right? So based on the history of our conversations and what we talk about here, you know, it's like, does someone have if we go back in time, right? Because theoretically, slaves in America had natal charts, you know? Right? And we'd say, right, does this chart have what it takes to be a good slave? You know? So to me, regardless of the question, the person was still born into slavery, and they were going to still have to try to find a way to work it out. Okay, and some of them who didn't have the chart to be good slaves, right? There was some kind of internal motivation and good upbringing, figured out how to do it anyway. Okay, they definitely paid a cost for it, right? But they figured out how to do it anyway. And I think interesting analogy, but I think when we have an idea of what we want to be or what we think we should be, in a sense we are enslaved to that idea. And so that's why this idea of, does someone have the chart to be able to do it, potentially they could make it work, right? But depending on the time and the environment, is it worth it, right? Is it worth it? Because to me, as a conscious human being, the thing that we can consciously choose is how we spend our time, right? And we can choose what types of experiences we have. That's always in our conscious choice, right? At least to a certain extent, right? Yeah. And so for me, the map is to try to get a sense of, so that we can be more wise and economical with the choices that we make. Because if someone says, I want, a good example is a football player, Julian Edelman, okay, receiver.
You know who that is?
I'm half Jewish, so yes, I know.
Yeah, of course he is, right? And so, right, Julian had a dream, to be a professional football player, right? And he had the potential in the chart, we could say the potential to do it, but at what cost? So the little guy, right, gonna be a Hall of Famer, right? But like what he's done to his body and the quality of his life after. So if there were greater things for him to achieve, right, the price that he paid for this dream, right, might cost him a further, more meaningful dream. So to me, a chart helps us get a sense of all of the potentials and be able to make choices accordingly.
Yeah, sorry.
Go ahead, David.
No, I wanted to comment a little bit. I think the analogy that you drew is spot on. I mean, Andrea alluded to, like, I spent some time in prison, and like that's like there's a mentality in there. I mean, that's what it is, and so like I definitely, there was a part of me that was driving towards, maybe this, I didn't know if it was an attainable goal when I started, shedding some extra pounds and doing a little cardio, but when I started to pick up speed, like it became more of a motivator. But there was also an aspect of like, man, I don't know if I want to be like, I'm kind of grinding myself down, and it's a lot, and it's due in large part to the environment that I was in. Like there weren't, if there was like other classes offered, if there was like a jujitsu class or something, maybe I would have focused more on that, but it wasn't. It was like, you're going to lift weights and get big, or you're going to play basketball and do that. And I did that, but like, that's not necessarily what I would have been doing had there been other options, I guess. I don't know that.
No, it makes
You have to take your chart and you say, like, if you have this sporty impetus in your soul, because, like, like according to what Ricky's saying, it's like we have this soul seed, actually, like our light, like where the light hits our eyes and it goes down our spine, like we have this soul seed. And then the chart is like this extrusion of our soul through a certain apparatus kind of thing, right? So we take your machine, your soul census machine, and we would put it in prison where there's no football field and there's no, so you can't really drive towards your dream of being a football player because you're stuck on the basketball court there. You know what I mean? Like you are kind of at the mercy of your environment, which Ricky and I talk a lot about, it's like putting a chart in a certain environment. And
yeah,
Yeah.
that makes sense.
Yeah. So, okay. So a couple of things come to mind. For the first one is, do we want to talk about the polarisms, or yeah, is that like, because as I'm looking at the chart, I have some ideas. I have some
okay.
ideas.
Well, first I want to go back to something you said, Ricky. I want to say, how would David know if it's worth his time to manifest being a football player? Because you said it depends on, is it worth it? Like, does one know?
So I think in this sense, like financially, if someone's thinking financially and they're creating a budget, right? Because a budget is how I'm going to make choices about allocating my resources. Okay, it's helpful to know, right, how much money they have. It's helpful to know how much money they have, right? And where that money is going to be, where those resources are going to be valuable and what they can have a chance to get in return, right? And they have to have some understanding of the market. And if they have that information, right, they can make better choices about whether it's worth it.
So is it good for your life monetarily, spiritually, physically, emotionally? Like, is it good for you to be a football player?
Well, to me, even before we can get to that question, um, like what are you here to do, right? And if being a football player can help you do it, right? Okay, we got something.
Huh.
Right? Because these external roles we play, right, they're serving some internal purpose. And if we don't have some clarity on what the internal purpose is, even if we have success in the external stuff, is like it's not meaningful. And I'm speaking from experience, yeah, right? There's an empty kind of feeling. Because for me, and it's going to be a similar story. Okay, when I was born, the sun was in Gemini, and so what I was put on this earth to do is every Wednesday have a conversation with Andrea. That's what I was put on this earth to do. That's right. And being a football player, right, in the future it'll open doors, but until this point it's actually created blockages to me getting here. And even when people are like, "You're a football player," it doesn't make sense. Why are you talking? Right? So, and I can't say that it was time wasted because I learned a lot of things that I'm utilizing now. But the time that I spent training to be a football player, I could have been training to be doing this, right? And that's just an observation based off choices, suffering, and joy, right? You can see, you can check the boxes. This felt good. This sucked. It was supposed to feel good, but it didn't. Feels good. I have no idea why this feels good, but this is the best thing I've ever felt. That's been my experience.
Well, sorry.
Yeah, go ahead, please.
Well, I just feel like, you being a pro famous football player is going to build your telos, your larger thing that you're growing into, because like I keep having to refer guys like David to you, who's like been in prison. He has manias, which we're going to talk about soon. He has 3 manias. He actually made a song called Tripolar because he actually, when looking at the chart, he has several manias, but has such a mania disorder, I guess you would call that word, that it sent him to prison for, crime or whatever. And I keep sending guys like this to you because you are the right astrologer to deal with big, scary men or, people with pasts who need redemption. Or like, I know that part of your story is like redemptions for certain things that your Mars did when you were young. It's like, so I think you being famous as a football player is a platform that you're going to stand on and jump off of as an astrologer. And, we're going to use that to get to the masses with what right? Like, so like,
okay, you're right. So let me rephrase that because I agree with you 100%. All right. So I'll say, but like being a football player came with a lot of baggage, extra stuff. And so what I'm saying is if I had more clarity about what I was doing and why I was being a football player, right? It would have helped with a lot of that baggage. So to me, it's like at going through that, I appreciate the power of someone understanding their chart more so they can be more efficient in the inefficiency in making choices is also trauma prevention because the most inefficient choices we make, right, are traumatic choices where we have to spend time, playing football in Canada because we were suspended for it, right? It's fine. We could say we learn and we grow, but in the course of time, it's inefficiency. And that's part of being young. That's why you have so much energy when you're young, right? Because you're going to be inefficient because you don't have enough experience. But when we don't learn and we grow older and we're still inefficient, right, it leads to premature death in early aging.
Yeah, there's a like the internal for me, like the reclamation of a part of my identity that I felt like I didn't have for a long time. Um, is a big motivator. But I think the first time, like when I met Andrea for the first time and we were talking, like I think the first thing I said was, I know this sounds crazy, but because I know it does. Like there's not, I don't have a whole lot of like, oh man, this better happen, otherwise I'm going to be lost. Like there were, a lot of points in my life. I mean, I got sober when I was 19. Um, I from 15 to 19, I had a pretty rapid progression of drug use and drinking, that took me to a really dark place at a really young age. And part of it was tied in, I had a herniated disc from a football injury, and got hooked on pain pills that were being prescribed. And that's part of my story too. And being able to be clean and being able to be sober, I think, has even and sort of opening that like spirituality door even just a crack through doing the activities in AA and working the steps, like that kind of
Yeah.
stuff has even allowed me to entertain the idea of this being a possibility, or even just continuing education, because I didn't start back at community college until I was 23. And I just, it's one of those things where, like, if this were to become a reality, wow, what a payoff for a lot of hard work and dedication that I did. And the truth is, like, for me, like my family, my dad played college ball way back in the day in upstate New York. And my grandpa played basketball and lacrosse at Syracuse. Like my uncle played soccer, my uncle on my mom's side played professional baseball. Like there's athletics within my family. And the truth is, like, you know, me going to prison and having this be now part of my story that I'm trying to reconcile, like it would be for them too. I think Andrew was like, oh, I want to be your number one fan if you ever make it onto the football field. And I was like, well, that's going to be my dad. My dad's going to be my number one fan
Move
if I ever
over,
make it onto the
Dad.
football field. Because yeah, like that's part of it too. For me, it would just be kind of that like dream scenario. But if it doesn't happen, like I said, like I've grown so much even going for it, even just like putting it out there and like talking about it with people. Like I've grown a lot, and it has already been beneficial, whether or not it ends up happening.
Wow.
Ricky, don't you
Yeah.
think though, because your Mars is on the South Node, you came in starting with football, right? And that was the beginning of your Talos, your dream manifestation. But for David, it might be that football is his or like something more later in life, right? Like it doesn't, you guys don't, football's not going to serve the same purpose in your two lives.
Oh, 100%. 100%.
Yeah.
So do you want to share the chart or do you want me to share the chart?
I was just sharing it as you said that.
Oh, perfect.
Okay, so yeah, let's look at, here's David's chart. Can we all see that? Um, so, well, Ricky, I'll let you take the reins. What do you want to, you have some things you want to say?
Well, here's where we have an issue because I use Placidus.
Oh, okay.
So my storytelling is
You want to share?
yeah, I'll share.
Different house systems, David. Long story. The astrologers will love that.
I'll take your word for it.
My house system is right, but you know,
Of course. Of course. I think that's the beauty. That's to me, that's the beauty of it is everyone's house system is right.
even if mine's more right.
Exactly. See, we can all agree. Okay. So, I mean, I can you tolerate this for a little bit?
Sure.
Okay. All right. So, and I'll tell you why it jumped out so quickly, because from what I hear of the story, and I talk about Neptune and Saturn, I talk about these are the planets of impossibility.
Hmm.
Okay? And they're in the area of the chart that has to do with games, the football.
Okay, fifth house.
Right? Yeah. And they are in a trine aspect to the sun and Venus. Ooh, okay. So there's right, you can see it. And the thing that I heard that got me most excited was the word story. The word story. Story, story, story. Because in my wacky kind of astrology thing that I look at is I look at which planet is the strongest. Which planet is the strongest?
Oh, yeah, that's a
And
big thing for you.
yeah, it's huge for me. Yeah. And so for me, I see that Mercury is the strongest planet, and Mercury was the messenger of the gods. Mercury was the messenger of the gods, and so Mercury up here in the 10th house. Okay, so my interpretation, right, is you were put on this earth because you have a story to tell. Right, you have a story to tell. So
That's
to
interesting.
me,
I never would have pegged Mercury as being super strong in this chart, but you're right. That's a super strong Mercury. And David, Mercury for us it rules like the throat chakra. Like when people have a strong Mercury, they are verbal and making a narrative about things. So what Ricky's trying to say to you is that whether you're a football player or whatever you do, the storyline about who you are and what you're doing is a big part of your life path and purpose.
Yeah, that checks.
I'm saying it to the point of if you want something to be activated or energized, a good form of doing that is think of, wow, this would be a really cool story. Seriously, that's always going to be a source of like support. Okay. But what's typically when we say an interesting stories aren't the ones right that are predictable and that right everything goes great, right? Those typically aren't the most interesting stories. Okay. And to get more, I would say because the Mercury is the strongest planet in the chart, that's general good advice, right? Of when I say good advice is if you want to activate something to make it more prominent, right? It's like, is this gonna give me a good story to tell? Another way of saying that, am I gonna learn something from this? Okay. Am I going to learn something from this? Right. It is going to make me smarter. Another same thing, right? They're all saying the same thing. Okay. And
That's
when
so
I say
interesting
smart,
because inquiries about football in some ways, and what you're saying is like that storyline is more important to this chart than football.
well, I'm saying yes, but not, but kinda. I'm not making a value judgment because the nature of this fifth house is very active, and the ruler of the cusp of the fifth house is up here in the 10th house. So right, I'm saying story is there, and the nature of the story, right, it can very easily, right, be an impossible story, right, about overcoming obstacles relative to sports.
Yeah.
Right. So what I'm saying is that the narrative is supported by the chart, right? 100% supported by the chart. Okay. But the in David, you already said it, right? Whether it happens or not. What I'm saying, whether it happens or not, okay, happens means you have an interesting story to tell, right? An informative story, a story that you tell that's gonna help people see things differently, right? And the stories we tell can only be based on the experiences we have. So also you have to look at the chart in general to get a sense of the types of experiences, which is going to give us information about the types of stories. All right. And when I think of anything that's drastic, right? Because for me, with especially with the planets, keywords, right? It's like keywords. I hear something and a word pops into my mind. I know exactly where to look in the chart. So anything that's drastic, always look to Pluto. Always, always,
I was
always,
looking at
always.
that Pluto opposed Venus Sun, like with the obsession,
Yeah.
like the
Yes.
obsession with drugs and everything, and like, and a lot of your mania, like David, it's one of your manias that you go through. Kind of, is it obsessive? I mean,
Yeah, I mean it yes.
like, what's obsession look like for you?
um whatever the obsession is becomes the most important thing in my life, and everything and everyone else becomes secondary or eventually doesn't matter. I mean, that's the easy example for me is like drugs. And when I was using drugs and drinking, even just smoking weed and every day and taking pills, and I mean, I was never legally able to drink, so I was stealing it or getting people to buy it for me, but I was getting really, really drunk all the time whenever I could. Nothing else was important unless I could achieve that. And so you can substitute anything in, whether, I mean, it's manifested in sports before, like I've gotten really um way too emotionally invested in sports. I mean, there's uh yeah.
Because your chart is actually, so you have Pluto and Scorpio, which is one of the most obsessive imprints. It's like Scorpio is it's like a fixed water. It's like it fixates on things emotionally, and then it's talking to your Taurus stuff. You're a Taurus sun. So it's like Taurus is fixed, it gets fixated materially on things. Like, so you have this like fixated opposition of just like, I've gotta, whether it be chew my nails or freaking eat the same croissant every day or like whatever it is, like obsession is one of your manias in it. And Ricky, what do you make of it being that Pluto square the moon as well? It's like in a T square. Like I think this chart, it could, if you fixated on healthy obsessions, you could go far, I would imagine.
I
Oh, of course.
fixated on working out for a lot of years. I mean, I was pretty obsessive about it, like,
Yeah.
yeah.
Have you
Yeah.
ever been fixated on baking? That's Taurus stuff.
Actually, when I was 13, yeah, I started
Dude, that'd be
Ban-
so cute. David the baker.
banana nut muffins was my specialty.
Dude, and we can actually time this every 3 years. Jupiter hits this, and you're going to go through like an obsession year. And there's going to be other manias to it. Like Mars will hit it every 6 months. So we might get an obsession. Like every 6 months, we get like a mania that goes for maybe 2 or 3 weeks of obsession. And so this is actually timeable where we could start timing obsession manias that you are going to go through. And then we can make lists of things like, can you get obsessed with XYZ? Or maybe if it's football stuff, it's like doing this one exercise for 2 weeks, or, I don't know. Sorry, Ricky. I feel like I'm taking over.
No, it's good. No, it's good stuff. We could. It's
Yeah.
fun. It's like hitting it back and forth.
Okay.
It's
I
great.
kind of, if I could say one more, like I kind of just sort of organically tried to identify some patterns with my mania, because like I said, growing up in Portland, like the weather pattern here has had a big effect on me. Like just the clouds and rain for 8 months straight can be, for me, I know it's not for everybody, but like it can be pretty devastating for me. Like, and I started to notice like there's been trouble spots in my life, whether it's going to psych wards or having these like crisis moments. I had a counselor describe it as a spiritual emergency once, which sort of made sense to me. I could contextualize that a little bit better than mania. But
Mm.
the month of
Mm.
March, I mean, I looked back in my life, and like around March, most of those big kind of crisis events tended to happen. If there was something that happened, that was it. And I was like, well, that kind of makes sense because you get into the rainy season here, which lasts 10 months long. And then, January, February, like I get kind of down and depressed and then want to, like when I haven't had like proper medication and safeguards and support, internally with AA, like that kind of stuff, I can just fly off the handle. Like I can lose touch with
Like,
reality.
do you get the kind of depressed where you're like despair, hopeless, I want to die depressed?
Not as, but it can. I mean, I attempted suicide 3 weeks into sobriety when I was 19. So that was sort of like the world was closing in on me experience. But most of the time it's just a like physically drained. I'm sleeping for a long 10-12 hours. I don't want to get out of bed. I don't want to go anywhere. It's just sort of this like shut everything down,
Ricky, do you think
kind
that
of
that's
thing.
his Saturn Neptune conjunction?
Well, I mean, the starting for me, the starting place, like you said, is the Pluto opposing these planets. Right, so this would be exploded, right? This would be exploded. Yeah,
You know, its own wheel.
yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, so the way I do astrology is like I'm always thinking of what is the purpose of things. So I understand. I think it comes from the tradition of behaviorism. Is that all we can recognize is this is what the planets are doing, and then we can see the behavior. Okay, but my inclination, Pluto person, right, is to go deeper. Is to say, okay, well, where's it coming from? Where's it coming from? Right? And to me, it's to keep digging and digging and digging and digging and I'm saying this because I'm a Pluto person and I'm speaking to David. You're a Pluto person,
Yeah.
right? And so, right, this is my relationship to this drive or to this urge to keep digging and digging and digging and digging and getting to the bottom of something. So, one of the words that's used to describe Pluto is intense, right? And you have Pluto in the third house, which is the house of how we see things, finding our voice. So naturally, right, when you see things, you tend to see, right, have a connection to seeing at the deepest core. But when you look around the world, no one else is functioning on that level, right? And so it can make you feel like you're crazy, right? Right? Because things that and every single cell of your body is to be true. But when you look around, it's like there's nothing else that's that's relating that it's true. Okay. So in part, this is part of what you have to deal with, right? And I say deal with, but I also say learn how to master, right? Because anything we have, right, the reason we have it is to get better with it. That's
David, do you read books? I can bring you this book, Pluto, the evolutionary journey of the soul. You might want to read about Pluto since you're very Plutonian.
Yeah,
Yeah.
100%. Pluto in the third. You should definitely be reading about Pluto.
Yeah,
There
yeah.
is
Pluto in the third would mean like you have a really intense brooding state of mind, is kind of what Ricky's saying.
Yeah.
Well, that's descriptive, but for me, what is the function of that kind of mind? It's the kind of mind that can see what is beneath the surface. So when I say, okay, the first thing I said is you're a storyteller, right? The things you're here to teach and the things you're here to talk about, okay, all right, are going to be deep, okay? And in order to be able to talk intelligently about deep shit, right, you have to go experience it, right? And so I would say the experiences you've had, right? I've said this before, but it feels so true, right? It's like when the universe kicked you off the cosmic diving board to come to Earth, right? It says you need to do some investigative journalism. Oh.
Yeah, David is super tough. Like when I met him at AA, he's just super impactful, and every time he shares, you're just like, it's
Yes.
like super impactful.
Yes. Yes. Yes.
So
Yes.
I'm looking in astrological remediation. I'm under the Pluto page, and it says the Pluto vibrations are penetrating, focused, digging, fixated, dark, morbid, deep, thick, soul bonding, power filling, and otherworldly. And it would say like Pluto needs to die and be reborn, to take it to the limit, to attach the soul to something, to be transformed entirely. Um, Problematic presentations of Pluto are fixation, obsession, obsessive addictions, being agitated on the level of inner consciousness, power struggles, intensity, stalking, and abusive relationships. So those are the problems of Pluto. But then we have all these remedies for Pluto, which, David and I can study, in our person. It's like what to do with that energy that's all good. Don't you think there can be a redemption for people who learn their chart when they've been in prison, they've done really intense things. I agree with you that him going to prison is part of his soul wanting to experience intensity and
Well, but it's back to what I said. It's about investigative journalism, right? There's where you might hear someone who goes into prison for 6 months to have the experience, so they have the ability to write about it, right? That takes a crazy person, right? And so if someone needs to have those experiences, they're going to trigger some experience that allows them to do the investigative journalism that they were put on this earth to do.
I learned a term called I took a sociology class a long time ago. Ethnography was the term.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. Okay. So ethnography, right? That comes from anthropology, right? And then we'd say anthropologists are ruled by the ninth house. The third house is journalism, investigative journalism. Ninth house is publishing. So it's right here. Okay. It jumps out. And
well,
again,
David, you could write a book.
I'd be lying if I said you guys were the first ones to suggest that. My dad was a writer for a lot of years, so he's, I think he was planning the publication before I even, got sentenced. But
exactly.
Yeah,
exactly.
He's got a lot to say. I can't wait for the next.
Always. There's so much, right? And so the idea of being committed, being imprisoned, right? In astrology, we would say that's the 12th house, right? And this is good for all the students that are watching this, right? Is if we look, there are no planets in the 12th house, but we can't deny meaningful experiences around 12th house, right? 12th house things, right? There's so many of them, okay? So what we can say is, right, the ruler of the 12th house is the moon, right? You asked about the moon, Andrea. Here we go, right? Moon squaring the Pluto, squaring the sun, squaring the Venus, right? Ruler of the 12th and the 6th, receiving a bunch of powerful aspects.
I totally understand what Ricky's saying. If you don't understand, it's a long story, but yes, he's totally speaking very correctly.
Yeah, so it's more for the students, but it's just the basic thing is when we talk about houses, the way I think about houses, they're about types of experiences we're going to have. All right. So if I'm talking to someone and they keep mentioning their sibling, my brother. All right. For me, I'm looking to the third house because all of the experiences in life related to siblings, okay, are activated here. Right. And if someone is talking about, being locked up in any kind of capacity, or I need to get out of here, right? Any kind of escapist stuff, right? I'm thinking of the 12th house. Yeah. And so if not looking at the chart first, but listening to what you say, right? The kinds of experiences that have been meaningful in your life, okay? I'm saying, okay, what the hell is going on with the 12th house? And when I look at the moon, it's like, whoa, right? It gives me a lot of information that powerful experiences, right? Coming through like the moon, right? And they have access to attracting 12th house experiences.
So do you think his moon in Aquarius would, I don't mean to detract, but I do have a question. Do you think his moon in Aquarius would lend towards the team part of football? Because moon in Aquarius is like emotionally invested.
I think to me, what the 6th house relates to football, but I say 6th house people are coachable.
Oh, I was say like work groups are very Aquarius.
Yeah, are coachable. If I'm thinking of team stuff, right, I'm thinking of the 11th house, right, and we got Mars here, right, the competitor in the 11th house. Makes sense, right? And again, for me, the 4th house is the father, right, and the father played sports on a team and he's a writer. Yeah. So yeah, this is where I would look to. And yeah, one ruler of the 11th and the 10th, the other one right here, Mars, definitely, right? It's the testimony, okay, is positive in that direction.
Yeah. So, okay. Sorry that I thought of a question.
I would stress it even more because the Mercury is the strongest planet in the chart, and it's conjunct the midheaven, and it's square the ascendant, and it's square a first house south node. So I would overly stress the need of the team, because to me the message here is what got in the way in the past was, right, I need to do it all by myself. Huh?
Yeah.
So I have a question for you, Ricky. So with David having had manias, and written this song about it, which we're gonna have to get on YouTube because it's a good song. It's a rap song about tripoles. He has three poles, and he's out of prison now, and he doesn't want to go back to prison, I assume. Um, how can we ensure that he doesn't have a mania where he ends up back in prison?
First of all, I would make an attempt, and not that it would be successful, but I would make an attempt to reframe the mania. I don't. I mean, the reason I love the word mania because it's so Plutonian, right? So, and I love words, and it's so like obvious in the chart. So I fall in love with mania. But if most people they only have the definition of mania that they get from the doctor, right? It doesn't work so much. But there's something instructive about Pluto and mania. Pluto rules things that are drastic, intense, right? Pluto's connected to death. And at least in my Christian upbringing, when you died, you had two choices, right? And they were drastic, right? Either you're going to burn you're going to burn eternally, or you're going to have harps and angels and Twinkies. So, right, that's extreme, right? And so for me, if this is such a powerful theme in the life, it's permission, okay, to be extreme, right? And to get to the core, I think Pluto is the most spiritual planet because the way it feels in my experience is like I've heard the voice of God, and because I heard it from God, nobody can tell me shit. That's the way it feels, right? When we say the intensity of something takes over, because, right, and I think, right, at least ideally, right, we all, like, God is speaking to all of us, okay? God is speaking to all of us, but in order to hear it, right, you got to get down to the bottom of yourself, to the part that can actually hear it.
Wait,
Right?
David, did the voice of God lead you into your crime?
I one of the features sometimes if my mania gets really bad, I start to believe that I'm Jesus Christ. Like that's
Perfect.
I
Yeah.
and I've heard that before with people that have that kind of heightened kind of brain activity or whatever it is, but like I full
Yes.
on, and there's nothing you can tell me, and this is how it's
Yes.
going to go, and I have a plan that makes perfect sense to me but is insane when like it just doesn't, there's no like grounding in reality in it. But in those moments, like I fully believe that. And I do, yeah, I hear the voice, I'm communicating with the spirit realm and all that stuff.
100%. It's real. Okay. It's like I was saying before, right? If you're at a certain level that's way deeper than everyone else, okay, if you try to orient to that outside level, you're going to feel, and because you feel, you're going to act crazy.
Well,
That's why the first thing is about reframing to understanding what the situation actually is and not accepting their definition of what is going on.
well,
Because their definition can't help. It can't.
Yeah.
so David, and I would say it's funny because a lot of people who go into these manias who get obsessed with thinking they're Jesus or God or whatever, it's like they have what you have, which are these extreme obsession moments where they're so powerful as to be a piece of God basically extruded. And it's funny because if you just tweak the sentence a little bit, it's like I am an extrusion of God is a little bit different than I am God, right? But it's like when the light hits your eyes and it goes on your spine and you're extruding it at this powerful level where you're like I am freaking God. You're actually in some ways correct. You are an extrusion of the God that is coming through the sunlight or what have you. And like your chart does get so powerful as to almost seem as a god, right? So I'm curious for you going into the future because in my experience, transits and charts kick med's ass. I mean, like there may be a moment where you go into one of these again. Is there a possibility to direct your godly self into all good things, or are there like Ricky was using the word like are there desperately intense things you can do that are not against the law that we could prepare your God self to do, or are you just out of touch with reality when you go into those meetings?
No, I mean that's actually I spent a lot of time focusing on how to harness that, because I mean the first 5 or so years that I was in recovery, I was heavily medicated with some pretty serious like anti-psych meds um, that just, I mean, knocked me out. Like I didn't wake up in the morning. I came to, and I was sober, but I was like coming out of a fog. And so like part of the unraveling was like not having the necessary amount of support when I was coming off of that, and then trying a couple different things. One of the things that I tried made things way worse. And there are features of kind of like the mania that I experienced that were, you know, um, hypersexualized and like very vivid. Like my senses were all just on all the time. And it wasn't always in a dangerous kind of way, but like for me, like the first I really, the whole time I was in prison, I made the number one priority. Okay, I'm conceding to the idea that I need to be medicated. I also know that I have never really in my life been on the right kind or the right amount. And so I really made an effort to do that. And what I'm on now is lower doses, and they're not heavily sedating, but it does kind of allow me to get a little bit of a like an elevated mood and not be nervous that it's going to go off the rails. So like that was priority one, and I feel like I'm kind of there with the medication piece. But yeah, harnessing that. I mean, I've grappled with that idea a number of times because it can be kind of like a superpower in a way, like intoxicating almost. I used to describe it as like taking an ecstasy pill without actually taking an ecstasy pill. Like I
Yeah.
can,
Well,
And your chart is hypersexual. Pluto and Scorpio is hypersexual. And then the sun in Taurus is ear, nose, and throat. So you're actually getting all this ear, nose, and throat energy. So the hypersenses makes a lot of sense too. So those are manias that you're like, that's why I asked about baking. It's like ear, nose, and throat. Like I can smell these cookies like nobody's business, right? Like it's like, and that's what we do is turn people into superpowers. I mean, Ricky is a superpower. He's famous. He's jumped on the biggest men in history. Like you have to be harnessing a godly
well,
self to do that, right?
he ran them over. I know you don't know much about the
I
football
don't.
part, Andrew. He ran them over. They were trying to jump on. Anyway, yeah, I got you.
Oh, Ricky.
yeah,
You're
thank
even
you.
hotter
Thank
than you once
you.
were.
Yeah, yeah. So I agree with what you're saying, and I think we're saying the same thing. It's just my orientation is so when I was diagnosed with social anxiety disorder, and they put me on Paxil, and I started talking to a therapist, and I realized, okay, the meds are helping me get to a level where I can work some shit out so that I don't need the meds anymore.
Mhm. That's
Hmm.
yeah. Uh, there's an element of like you're just putting a band-aid on the wound. It's not healing me. It's not fixing the mental illness.
Well, but it could put you in a place where you could do the work, right? That's what I'm saying. That it has a function, because if you medicate yourself, you don't have the ability to do what you're here to do.
Yeah. And
Right. That's what I'm saying.
yeah.
Because we need all of ourselves. We need all of ourselves to be it. But sometimes parts of ourselves, oh man, right? It takes a minute. It takes a minute to figure out how to use this thing. Right. But the good news is, because you were born to do something great. And people who are born to do something great, it's not ever, ever, ever easy, because they got to figure out how to use the tools that help them manifest the greatness in this really fucked up world. So, right.
Well,
and to
and
me,
David, I would
it's
say
ridiculous.
a
Sorry, go
rogue
ahead.
approach would be if you go into one of these manias again, where you think you're Jesus, I want you to come talk to me and Ricky, and I want us to look at your chart right in the moment, and I want us to say, like, how can we channel this superpower you have? Like, you're talking to two superheroes right now. Like, what superhero are you? And it's like, I want to go Marvel Comics on you and say, like, what are you? Like Ricky's saying, what are you here to do? And can we channel that in this moment? So don't let this be the last episode we ever have. Like, I would love to have you being a recurring character where we can help you as you kind of go through these polls. And just a thought. I mean,
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that's I have to be, I've trained myself to be careful with the line of thinking, like, oh, well, yes, I know I can just kind of go off the medication and then I can be my true authentic self, but not right now, probably, like that's kind of where I'm at. It's just like, it's been a few months, and like, I think, Ricky, what you said, like, there are things that being on the medication that I'm on now can really just allow me to kind of mellow out and work through what I need to work through,
Yeah, exactly.
out here. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Right.
Yeah.
we're not anti-meds. I'm on schizophrenia meds. Like, my chart's schizophrenic, and I 100% am like, yeah, my chart's schizophrenic. I'm never going off this med. Like, my chart needs help. Like, I'm not anti-med. I, in fact, think God created meds. I mean, like,
Well, he did, but my whole thing is that people are, like you said, utilizing them. Like, to me, the question for everything is, how can I use this? And we can only ask the question of how can I use this if we have an image of use it for what, right? That's why, what am I here to do? And then I can see all the things that are in my life. How can I use these things to accomplish the thing that I'm here to do?
You and I are so in line with that, because teleological astrology, that's all they do, is they say, what is the life path and purpose of this chart, and why this mania, why the sun in Taurus opposed Pluto, what is the obsession for? Like, and I think that's such a good reminder, Ricky. We got to keep asking David, like, why? If he's like, I'm God, you're like, okay, God of what? Like, why? Like,
Because to me, it's God of what? But it's like going to those places where you feel like that, and then asking yourself, right, where does the world need this energy? Right? Because the thing about Pluto, if we make it personal, it will destroy us. Pluto is the part of us, because it's the deepest part. It's the part, to me, Pluto is oneness, but not like Neptune, we all mish like a soup. It's oneness like a football team, right? Is that each of us are highly trained individuals that are all coming together to accomplish one goal, right? Ooh, like division of labor, all coming together, cooperation, right? And the deepest cooperation, the way I see it, is like we're all cells in the body of humanity, and we all have a function that we have to do in order to make the body of humanity healthy, right? And to me, this is Pluto talk. And if you're not willing to live and think on that level, Pluto will fucking destroy you. If
I
you
love that
are,
point,
oh,
that
you can
Pluto is
change the
not
world.
personal. It's like that otherworldly, godly power he has is not even about him. It's like for some other greatest good purpose. It's like, All right, you
Yes,
guys, it's 3 o'clock.
yes, yeah.
Well, did you have any fun, Ricky?
Oh, did I? Yeah, I
How
did.
about you, David?
Oh, it's great. Yeah. Really appreciate it. Yep.
Well, thank you both. This is such a pleasure. Ricky, I'll work on how to entertain you next week.
Yeah, I got some. I mean, I'm a Gemini, so I might have changed my mind, but I have an interesting topic
What is it?
that I'd like. Let's just put it on. I want to talk about slavery. I want to talk about slavery
Okay. Okay. Well, do you want to do that next
next
week?
week. Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
All right, I'll
Hell
be
yeah, because it takes everything we've been talking about, and it makes it real. Right? We can have real examples.
That's a kind of
Yeah.
controversial subject too, and I think, okay, cool, we can do that. I will be your
Yeah.
servant in that. I almost said slave. All right. All right. I'll see you guys next
Yeah,
week.
that works too. All right.
All right.
All right.
Bye.
Yeah. Bye.